Hi, I'm on Secret Crush, and I want to talk to you about Genshin. My brain loves to absorb trivia about anything that interests me, and I typically have pretty decent recall too. It's how I got such good grades in school, despite having undiagnosed ADHD. So when a new version of Genshin comes out, I usually load up with as much information as I can, so I can start forming connections and turn the loose cloud of names and concepts into a coherent picture of what's going on. I'll supplement this with lore discussions and reading or watching theories, and often consult the wiki for quick refreshers, but it's always the most satisfying when the foundation of my understanding comes from my own noggin. For some reason, I failed to properly load up the lore database in my head during Natlan. I knew perfectly well that artifact stories and weapon descriptions and books held important information, but for some reason I simply chose not to read them. I relied on the quests alone to relay what I needed to know, a classic blunder. Combine that with those quests being delivered spread out across many months, and I had a very shallow understanding of what was going on in Natlan. It is embarrassing to admit this, but in the climactic battle against Gasoithoth at the end of the Archon quests, I did not grasp that the Abyss was mimicking the form of the dead Pyro Dragon and tapping into memories to speak with the voices of former Archons just to mess with Moeka and the Travelers' heads. I was convinced it was saying that Xbalanque, the only name I recognized among them, was secretly evil or something. But then that never got followed up on, so I was perplexed. And I didn't really bother to figure out what was actually happening until very recently. Shameful, I know. Now, in fairness to myself, Natlan's story starts throwing around a lot of names and concepts well before offering enough information to contextualize any of it. Some of that information wasn't offered up at all until the very last patch in the Natlan cycle. Which brings me to 5.8's Archon quest, Song of the Welkin Moon, Prelude, The Journey Home. Catchy title, really rolls off the tongue. I knew it would be setting up the story's eventual departure from Natlan into Nod Cry, but I wasn't expecting it to pull so much of the ancient dragon lore onto center stage. By sheer coincidence, I had been poking around on the wiki page for the 13 Sovereign Lords just before the 5.8 trailer was released, and it was only because of that I already knew who Lianka was before the trailer mentioned her by name. I had never to my memory encountered that name in the game. I had just remembered a readable about a dragon with a human daughter and wanted to know who that was. So even though I declared I wasn't going to make a recap video for 5.8, here we are. Although this isn't going to be a recap in the same way my 5.7 videos were. I decided that I was going to once and for all do the reading, review the major world quests about dragon history, and figure out which of Natlan's 6 heroes existed when. So you can think of this video as my final book report after weeks of cramming, so I can head off to Nod Cry confident I mostly have a handle on what actually was Natlan's whole deal. For the sake of keeping this video's scope manageable, I'm going to summarize only the parts of history that directly relate to the Little Saurian Buddy world quests and the 5.8 Archon quest. So that means we won't be looking at every single major historical figure. There are simply too many of them, and at different points in time. This video also isn't going to touch on the Easy Breeze Summer Resort quests, as it didn't relate enough to the things I mainly wanted to talk about. Okay, let's go! I've broken down everything I want to talk about into sections to help keep things organized. Don't worry, there's not going to be a quiz at the end. We have to begin with a very brief overview of Teyvat from the beginning. Nibelung, the Dragon King, is born alongside the world. He loves all life on Teyvat. He receives a warning from an interstellar voyager that the world will be destroyed. He decides to leave to try to find a way to prevent it, but first creates the 3 Moon Sisters to guide the cycles in his stead. There are also 7 dragon sovereigns with authority over certain areas and elements. A usurper from beyond the sky appears, and the 3 Moon Sisters seem to have helped it take over Teyvat. The usurper defeats all the sovereigns, some fatally, some less so, and puts humans down on the planet to live in a unified civilization. Humans receive guidance from angels on behalf of the heavenly principles. Angels are believed to be related to the moons. Nibelung comes back to find someone moved into his house and rallies the dragons for a war of vengeance against the heavenly principles, the usurper, and its minions. I think this war is when the moons are shattered. Many of the angels lose their bodies and become the Seelies we know and love. Celestial nails are cast down to repair the land. Ultimately, Nibelung loses the war, but the usurper also has its functions ruined, which make it harder to exert its authority over Teyvat. The Heavenly Principles works with one who came after, whoever that is, to create the Gnosis using the Dragon Sovereign's elemental authority, which are given to Archons to help maintain order. That's as much as I have to say about Nibelung for now. If you'd like to learn more about him in detail, I highly recommend Ashikai's recent video about the Moon Wheels. The Pyro Sovereign Xiaquatl is born from primal flame and is the lord of all heat, light, and wisdom. On the same day he is born, Xiaquatl makes himself a brother from the primal flame, Kukulkan. He also creates pyroviships, which I believe are the ancient ancestors of modern saurians. There is also a council of 13 sovereign lords, who are artificial intelligences built with secret source technology, who have greater wisdom and authority than ordinary dragons. The dragons have mastery of phlogiston, which is a kind of primordial light energy that can store and transmit information. They use it to keep records, power mechanisms, and more. When the usurper arrives, Xiaquatl is defeated and buried in lava. Humans make themselves at home where the dragons used to live. It's unclear what Kukulkan and the other dragons were doing during this time. When Nibelung returns, Xiaquatl wakes up and busts out of his lava prison for the War of Vengeance. I believe the war is what damages Natlan's ley lines, and there is a period of time before the Night Kingdom is established to record its memories and souls in their place. Xiaquatl regains local control of Natlan, forcing all of Natlan's humans to eke out a mere survival in the wilderness. Xiaquatl was partially corrupted by the Abyss in his lava prison, and needs to take a lot of naps, leaving Kukulkan to act as regent when he's not awake. The 13 sovereign lords kind of do whatever they want in their own territories. Some of them have more amicable attitudes towards humans than others. Eventually, humans learn how to use phlogiston, something only dragons were supposed to be able to do. Humans refer to the one who gave them this knowledge as the Sage of the Stolen Flame, Wahaklahun Uba-Khan. As human knowledge of phlogiston spreads, the human tribes fight against each other for dominance and begin taming pyroviships. A human named Xbalanque appears and rallies the tribes together into an alliance against the dragons. Xbalanque leads a party to infiltrate the dragon city of Tolan and slay Xiaquatl. Both of them fell from the volcano together, but Xbalanque emerged from Xiaquatl's body with a portion of his authority, and thus became the first Pyro Archon. Xbalanque leads the alliance that now rules Natlan, but due to an oath, decrees that no one is to harm any of the remaining dragons. At some point, the following happened, but I'm uncertain exactly when. Xbalanque made an arrangement with Renova, the ruler of death, creating the Ode of Resurrection. The Lord of the Night rebuilt the destroyed ley lines into the Night Kingdom. The role of Archon is passed down to successive generations of human heroes, and Natlan's war against the Abyss continues into the present day. Presumably, Kukulkan's regency began while Xiaquatl was buried in lava. He considers himself to be the wisest among dragons, and seems to have a poor opinion of everyone else, referring to the other lords as squabbling fools. Unsurprisingly, his reputation among the lords was not great. The council even voted to impeach him at some point, although it's unclear when or why. The full records are unreadable, so the case against him is unknown, but all lords were present for the vote, so this must have been well before humans began uniting against the dragons. He finds humans interesting, despite them being the weakest species. He also believes dragonkind is too powerful, and their nature as a species that pursues power has brought them to a dead end. He recognizes the abyss is a threat to all living things, but disagrees with his brother Xiaquatl on the best way to fight it. Xiaquatl's plan involves turning everything into phlogiston using a device called the Huitzilopochtli, which requires 2 gems made from one of his eyes to activate it. Kukulkan conducts experiments in technology and evolution, including merging human and dragon bloodlines. One of these experiments results in his heir, Och-Kan. He is the one who teaches humans how to use phlogiston, but keeps this a secret by adopting the identity of Wahakla Hun Uba Khan. He believes this knowledge will civilize the humans, but will also order their destinies. Despite the fact that the hero Xbalanque spoiled his original plans for Och-Kan, Kukulkan eventually made an oath with him. I believe he might have also engineered Och-Kan's escape from his lab and set things up so that his son would meet Xbalanque and go live among the humans. I also believe, but can't really prove, that Kukulkan told Xbalanque how to defeat Xiaquatl. To prevent Xiaquatl's phlogistonization device from being activated, he gave one of the control keys to Xbalanque as part of their oath, which was basically declaring a truce between humans and any surviving dragons after the Pyro Sovereign is defeated. He also apparently placed seals on the ruins of the dragon city of Tolan that can only be undone by human hands. His words and deeds regarding Huitzilopochtli frequently seem contradictory, but we will discuss this further later. Born in Kukulkan's lab in Tolan, Och-Kan was a dragon mixed with a human soul, who had a longer lifespan than an ordinary human. Kukulkan has many seemingly contradictory claims for what his goal with Och-Kan was at different points. First, he wanted him to slay Xiaquatl and take his place as the Pyro Sovereign. Or he wanted to learn how the usurper used ley lines to protect the planet, although it's unclear how Och-Kan would have enabled this. Or he wanted him to activate the Huitzilopochtli, presumably since he could both undo the seals and had the Flame Lord's authority, which he refused to do. He eventually escaped from the sheep pen of Kukulkan's lab in Tolan, but Kukulkan claimed to have personally neutralized him, perhaps as a cover for getting him out of the city and into contact with humans. He met Xbalanque and quickly became his #1 fan, because the hero showed him great compassion. He also befriended many of the 6 heroes following Xbalanque becoming Archon, including Lianka and Ishkik, and may have accompanied them during the siege of Tolan. After Xbalanque entered the Sacred Flame, Och-Kan essentially declared himself regent in his place. His reverence for Xbalanque quickly veered into an obsession with making him the one true god of humanity. He forbade worshipping the Lord of the Night, and feared dragons might return to reassert dominance. He hated everything related to dragons, including himself. He built the ineffable city Och-Kan over the ruins of an ancient dragon city. He discovered its dragon lord, the Ninth, was still alive deep below the city, and bound her to a statue, tried to use her to power the city's technology. When she was uncooperative, he instead decided to seal that part of the city, and also tried to kill all the workers who excavated the chamber in the first place. These excavations also allowed the abyss to creep in. Oops. As a substitute for the uncooperative dragon as a power source, he placed his mind into a new core of Chu'ulel to enslave his draconic parts to serve humanity. Due to his erratic behavior, all the conscripted labor on the city, and breaking Xbalanque's decrees on leaving the dragons alone, he gains a reputation as something of a tyrant. He apparently even knows that the people don't like what he's doing, but carries on, confident it's all for the greater good. At some point, he hid Kukulkan's golden entreaty on the Tonatia in such a way that Kukulkan couldn't just take it back. A new group of 6 heroes eventually comes together to take the tyrant down, led by a scarlet-eyed youth who goes on to become the 2nd Archon. They succeed, burn the city, and the youth witnesses Och-Kan's body fall into a pitch-black mire. The city becomes a forbidden ruin, with an evil dragon guarding it for centuries to come. Kukulkan didn't want to turn every living thing in Natlan into phlogiston to defeat the Abyss, but no dragon who served Shaky could refuse his orders. Assuming he means this literally, I suppose that's why Kukulkan kept setting up complex schemes to make it possible, if very unlikely, for someone to activate Huitzilopochtli. All his plans involving Och-Kan were a bust, so he creates and spreads stories about how Saurians born with the Flame Lord's blessing can be cleansed in the volcano. The Flame Lord's blessing is a real phenomenon. Saurians with it contain higher concentrations of phlogiston power than their bodies can handle, eventually becoming frenzied mutations. The Flame Lord's blessing seems to be an indicator of a Saurian directly descended from Shaky's bloodline. However, the cleansing ritual is made up as an enticement to bring a human and a Saurian to the volcano together. He also creates and spreads stories about a Jade of Return, a treasure hidden in Och-Kan that has the power to permanently quell the Abyss. Shortly after the Conrian Cataclysm, an adventure team goes into Och-Kan looking for it. Instead, all but one team member die there, the survivor, a young mystic, who returns to tell their families. 20 years later, the team leader's daughter ventures in hoping to find it herself, or at least some trace of what happened to her father. She unseals Och-Kan's mind from the core of Chu'ulel, which now takes the form of a little sprite she names Kokoik. Eventually, she discovers the truth that the Jade is dangerous to humanity and determines to keep it from falling into that person's hands. I believe Kukulkan likely identified Traveler as a potential candidate to accompany the Chosen of Dragons when they entered Natlan, and granted them the ability to indwell Saurians. I think he also orchestrated the circumstances that led to them adopting an orphaned Flame Lord blessed to Petlisor. I named mine Little Brudder. Using golden inscriptions and masks from the various people Och-Kan had devoured, he guides the Traveler and Lil Brudder around Natlan's ancient ruins, gradually revealing information about the nation's ancient history with the Abyss and Phlogiston. The goal is to eventually send them to the volcano with the golden entreaties, ostensibly to cleanse Lil Brudder of his mark. After learning the Sage of the Stolen Flame was in fact a dragon, and getting the first golden entreaty, they head to Och-Kan to find the second. There, they meet Bona and Kokoik and retrace her path in the Cinder City to get the second golden entreaty, not realizing that she is essentially an echo of someone from another time. As soon as they retrieve it from the skyship Tonatia, Bona's echo remembers she shouldn't still be here, and the dragon of the Cinder City snatches the entreaty from them. Kokoik shoots the dragon down with its super awesome sauce laser, and Traveler and Paimon follow it down a deep hole in the sea. Kokoik, who turned out to be Och-Kan's soul, reunites with the dragon body, and Och-Kan regains his senses in his dying moments, revealing as much as he can to the Traveler by sharing his memories. These memories offer the first confirmation that the people Traveler had previously met were actually tools of the Sage. Meanwhile, Kukulkan reveals his true face to Lil Brudder for a private chat, encouraging him to travel to the volcano so he can make the final decision. They take both golden entreaties to the volcano and enter the ruins of the city of Tolan. A series of small robots, secret source servants, are possessed by Kukulkan, although he does not identify himself to them, and guides the group through the process of undoing seals, restarting various mechanisms, and gaining the permit required to enter the heart of the sacred mountain. When they place the entreaties in the heart, they enter a pillar of light, believing it will take them to the final trial to cleanse Lil Brudder. A large, secret source mech awaits them. In the battle, Traveler and Paimon are sealed inside a barrier. Lil Brudder attempts to use the power inside it to free them. Instead, Kukulkan appears and uses the proper guidance to channel Lil Brudder's power and transform his body into that of a mature dragon, and also gives him enough wisdom so that he can speak in sentences instead of Rawr! Kukulkan takes Lil Brother into the true heart of the mountain and tells him what it is, explains the complex series of events that brought them all to this point, and asks him to decide if he will activate the Huitzilopochtli. Lil Brother, not wanting to place his friends Traveler and Paimon in danger, refuses to activate it, against Kukulkan's protests, and claims that they don't care about him as much as he does them. Lil Brother ignores all that and finds his own way back to their side, freeing them from the barrier. After successfully defeating the dragon mech, Lil Brother uses the last of the power and wisdom to tell the Traveler via golden inscription that he loves them, then collapses and reverts back into his original form. They all leave the volcano. Traveler and Paimon have no idea what Lil Brother learned from Kukulkan, or even who Kukulkan was. They assume they have successfully completed the cleansing ritual, and now Lil Brother can grow up happy and healthy. It seems like Lil Brother's excess power from the Flame Lord's blessing has been consumed, so maybe they have technically. Meanwhile, Huitzilopochtli no longer has enough power to maintain itself any longer. The opportunity to activate Xiaquatl's phlogistonization plan has passed. Kukulkan muses to himself that Lil Brother made the same choice he did, and Och-Kan as well, before fading away. Natlan is unique among the other nations of Teyvat in that humans and dragons have existed together for much of its history, although their relationship was largely hostile before the Alliance era. The War of Vengeance resulted in the human civilization that the Heavenly Principles created in Natlan to be destroyed, and the remaining humans split into tribes that fought amongst themselves for resources. The 13 sovereign lords had distinct personalities. They're stated to be artificial intelligences, but for lack of a better word, they seem like people. They appear to be body agnostic, but often make reference to their own claws or teeth. They are fusions of information and phlogiston, with greater wisdom and authority than common dragons or bishops. Some of the lords wanted to exploit the humans' tendencies for infighting as a method of pest control. The 8th Lord, priestess of floral candles and skyborn feathers, had a reputation for being tender-hearted towards humans. Her personal records indicate that she felt the humans' troubles were caused by their lack of an instinct to submit to a natural hierarchy, like dragons did. She thought they would become less prone to senseless violence if they could only be forced to understand the natural order of the weak submitting to the strong. When humans began to learn phlogiston, she immediately suspected Kukulkan gave it to them, and felt it was only going to fuel their violent tendencies, like giving a rusty knife to a wailing infant. She assumed he had done this as a means of forcing humankind to destroy itself. She also pitied Kukulkan, who Xiaquatl treated indulgently, and wrote, whether his actions were just or misguided, the sovereign would always respond with gentle agreement, and precisely because of this, his unease only grows deeper. Eventually, she took in a human child to raise in the ways of dragonkind, perhaps to test her theory that a penchant for violence could be nurtured out of humans. This child was Lianka, the future founder of the Flower Feather clan, raised as a dragon princess. Some lords referred to this child derisively as the 8th Lord's pet, while the 8th Lord always called her beloved daughter. When grown, she encouraged her daughter Lianka to seek her own path and gifted her the dragon-forged bow Chainbreaker. At the peak of human tribes forming an alliance against the dragons, the 8th Lord was accused of treason against her kin because her daughter had joined forces with Xbalanque. Although not all lords agreed this constituted a crime on the 8th Lord's part, the Council of Lords still voted to execute her. The method of execution was a form of curse that caused immeasurable pain for every ounce of goodwill she may feel for humanity, until her mind was utterly destroyed. This seems to be how to kill a being that is pure consciousness. After the humans won their war against the dragons, all the sovereign lords were gone. The 6th and 10th lords had fallen before the war. The 8th lord was executed, while the rest were believed to have perished in the siege of Tolan. In truth, 2 had survived into the present day. One of those who fell before the war, unclear which, had been sealed in the mountains and is now known as Kukulkan, which simply means destined ruler, so probably not in any way related to his original name. The other was the 11th lord, Mirror of the Dawning Morn, assumed dead like the others, but otherwise unaccounted for after the war. 11th Lord was the sole survivor of the war, but she hated humans so intensely, she never wanted to succumb to the temptation to seek a place to belong among them. So, she placed the exile's curse on herself. The curse caused the part of her that wanted a place to belong to split off into a separate entity from the part of her that wanted revenge on humanity, but they remained connected enough that neither could follow through on their desires. During the period of Och-Kan's reign, 11th Lord tried to trick Lianka into helping her sever that connection by claiming she was the good entity and the malfunction was the bad one, because Lianka had administrator privileges as 8th Lord's daughter. Lianka did not fall for the trick, and instead got Och-Kan to help build a new core for the malfunction, to suppress the curse by erasing any related memories, while sealing 11th Lord into her mother's former domain. The core contained a gem that would act as the final key to all of the seals. Lianka sent the malfunction across the sea to seek her own path, and also keep the final key well out of 11th Lord's reach. She ended up in Nodcry, where 2,000 years later, an inventor named Aino rebuilt her into the humanoid robot Inefa. In the present, the Fatui Harbinger Marionette wants to capture the 11th Lord for unknown reasons, but to that end, enacts a plan that involves luring Inefa back to Natlan. Meanwhile, the 11th Lord has spent the last 2,000 years slowly regaining control of the systems in 8th Lord's domain, and also wants to lure Inefa to the domain so she can gain control of that final key to break the seals and gain administrator privileges, and sever the malfunction so she can finally exact her revenge on humanity unimpeded. This almost works, but instead, Inefa breaks free of the curse by overloading it with her 2,000 years of accumulated personal memories, which awakens the gem in her core as a moon wheel. With Traveler's help, she triumphs over the 11th Lord for good. Alright, at last we have come to the part where I get to do some media analysis. Before 5.8's Archon Quest, there was a limited amount of information about how the organization of Dragon Society looked from within. I'm pretty sure there was no indication about the existence of the 13 Sovereign Lords before we could get inside Tolan in 5.5. 8th Lord's records might be the first description of dragons having a concept of hierarchy written into their blood. She claims that even if she took the form of a human, other dragons would instinctively recognize her as an authority to obey. So it's a natural assumption to make that she and the lords in turn instinctively felt compelled to obey Xiaquatl. Maybe they also submitted to Kukulkan as regent, but that didn't prevent them from voting to remove him from his position of authority. It's unclear if that vote had any meaningful impact on anything, however. Also, curses, here used as a metaphor for programmed restrictions on behavior, may explain why Kukulkan felt unable to outright refuse Xiaquatl's request to activate the Huitzilopochtli, and instead take a very meandering route to push off its activation to the literal last possible moment. However, it seems like Xiaquatl was rather indulgent towards all his subjects, not just his brother. He approved every sovereign's request for nearly anything they asked to do. It seemed like he was content to let everyone do whatever they wanted, which 8th Lord seemed to find distressing. She wanted to please him, but couldn't tell what would actually make him happy. From records he wrote himself, Xiaquatl knew about all of Kukulkan's experiments, including Och-Kan. We saw glimpses of conversations between them where it seemed he wanted to have his brother agree with him on his own, instead of forcing him to comply. It doesn't seem like he ever actually ordered his brother to do anything with regards to the Huitzilopochtli. If dragons were hardwired for a clearly defined hierarchy, it makes sense that a ruler that didn't exercise firm control over his subjects would be unnerving to them, and why the Dragon Empire was always going to collapse eventually. Natlan's story is full of variations on the unreliable narrator concept, whether it's someone presenting information in a way that is intended to mislead or deceive, or simply a lack of accurate historical records. Given how often information is given in fragments and scraps to control how much we can know at any given time, the game itself is arguably an unreliable narrator. Kukulkan is the classic, intentionally deceptive type. It wasn't until the Och-Kan quest in 5.2 that we learned nearly all the people we met on Lil Brother's journey were someone else in disguise, and not until 5.5 did the name Kukulkan ever come up at all. Throughout the entire World Quest series, his role in the story is to manipulate and mislead. Once his intentions regarding Lil Brother are revealed, it would be easy to interpret him as a standard villain, the cold, calculating mastermind who has no regard for anyone he uses to achieve his goal. But then, in the end, it turns out that the thing he spent millennia setting up was something he didn't even want to happen. I have never put in even half as much effort doing a thing I actually wanted to happen, let alone something I did not want to do. Reading the Eighth Lord's records provided an interesting and fresh perspective on his personality. His own words in the quest paint him as a haughty snob who thinks he's smarter and better than everyone else, but Eighth Lord clocks him as a sad nerd who's always complaining that no one understands him while refusing to actually talk to anyone. She offers an explanation for why his motives seem to be so contradictory, that his sovereign brother's indulgence and failure to give clear directions left him floundering in uncertainty. Then there's also the issue of Natlan's historical records, which, to be frank, are a little bit scattered. Natlanese humans lack a complete and objective understanding of not just ancient dragon history, but the earliest events of their own history. They have no physical access to dragon ruins and wouldn't be able to read their records at all. Thanks to their protagonist privileges, Traveler has far more access to dragon history than the average historian. Before Ahau blabbed the phrase sovereign ruler, nobody knew much about the 13 sovereign lords, and even with that phrase to start from, Citlali couldn't find much beyond how many there were. Specific information like their names was completely lost. A lot of early human history in Natlan was only preserved in the form of tribal legends, which would have been largely passed down by storytellers before being written down or woven into scrolls for posterity. Each piece of the Obsidian Codex artifact set begins with the sentence, "Many stories transpired that were never recorded or eulogized in any human history." Artifact and weapon stories are a source of information that only we as players have access to, but they're presumed to be closer to the truth than any other source. Even so, plenty of Natlan's artifact and weapon stories include passages about what the tribal legends say, muddying the waters if you aren't doing a careful reading. Books, on the other hand, are understood to be less reliable because Irminsul has the power to alter known history, including changing the texts of historical records. Ironically, fiction and fairy tales are often left alone by such changes, which means lots of secret truths can be learned from them, if you can decipher their allegories. Plenty of the collectible books found in Natlan make no secret of being fictionalized. The records of Hanan Pacha reads like a transcript of a storytelling session, including phrases like, "Some say, thing that is true, but how could that be? Because we all know, inaccurate tribal legend." Fires of Autumn Twilight's description straight up says it's a combination of tales from different time periods. However, just because fiction can smuggle the truth past Irminsul's editing, doesn't mean every piece of fiction is reliable. it can be hard to tell the difference between an allegory of actual historical events and something the author completely made up. And on the topic of Irminsul changes, I'm not even sure that's applicable within Natlan. What happened with Rukkhadevata, or Wanderer, was someone or something deliberately overwriting the original events in Teyvat's history database. Natlan's original ley lines were entirely destroyed, and even now the Night Kingdom seems to be closed off from the rest of Teyvat, so those memories probably aren't getting uploaded to Irminsul anyway. In the period before the Night Kingdom's construction, I'm guessing there was no system in place to record and pass along those memories of the deceased aside from oral storytelling traditions. So it seems likely the degradation of historical truth is more due to facts becoming lost, via the typical game of telephone, where each successive telling gradually shifts and changes over time. A prime example of this is the apparent overlap between the tales of Och and Xbalanque. Och is said to be the first human to receive the knowledge of phlogiston from Wahaklahun Och-Kan, while Xbalanque made an oath with the sage after appearing suddenly in tribal legends. There aren't any stories about the sage directly interacting with anyone other than those two, and once the stories start being about Xbalanque, you stop hearing about Och. For a long time, there was a theory suggesting that Och and Xbalanque were meant to be the same person, but after I started reviewing quests and reading all the text I had skipped before, it seems more likely to me that these two were separate individuals who probably lived at very different times. Eighth Lord's records solidified this idea for me, since there are hints in that text that a long amount of time by human standards would have passed between the period where humans had just mastered phlogiston, when the tribes still fought amongst themselves, and when they began to form an alliance under Xbalanque. I think this would have been the period of time when the tribes hadn't started keeping their own records, and the Night Kingdom didn't yet act as a repository of memory. The legends imply the Sage of the Stolen Flame was himself a human. If the sage only ever interacted with two named heroes, it makes sense that the legends passed down would flatten time until it's unclear those heroes lived in different eras. Another example brought up by the 5.8 Archon quest is the story of Ishkik's death. The version passed down by the Children of Echoes is that she wanted to keep her forging methods out of her former friend Och-Kan's hands, so she set fire to her workshop and took her own life. The truth presented by the Ring of Yashki is that her twin brother Apub accidentally killed her in an argument over Och-Kan's orders to hunt down the dragons, by drawing his sword to intimidate her to agree with him, and accidentally cutting her throat. This one bugs me for multiple reasons. Firstly, I dislike how often Hoyo just casually drops in mentions of suicide as a plot device. I also dislike how easy it would be to accept the quest dialogue's version of history as fact, if I hadn't already been going out of my way to read all the equipment stories. At the end of the Archon quest, Inefa says that Lianka continued to see Och-Kan as a friend until her death, in contrast to tribal legend pitting them against each other. There's nobody to speak up to tell Ishkik's truth in a similar fashion. It also got me wondering why Shalonen didn't inherit Ishkik's memories with the ancient name they share, like Mualani did in Natlan's Archon quest. Maybe this is just a me problem, but I want justice for Ishkik. Also, don't pull swords on your siblings in a fight. Players usually have more pieces of the puzzle than characters do, but even that is rarely complete enough to confidently and accurately put it together, especially with as scattered and incomplete as Natlan's history is. Remember, the whole dang game is an unreliable narrator. Trust no one. The causes of Och-Kan's madness may be similar to the 11th Lord's curse, and related to his half-dragon, half-human nature. His mind contained conflicting desires, exert authority like a dragon lord might, submit to Xbalanque, even if that meant doing things that Xbalanque would not have wanted him to do, execute plans for the benefit of humanity in the long run, even if it harmed many humans in the short term. Except for Xbalanque showing him kindness, he never found a place of belonging either among dragons or humans. Each group saw him as an other. Both Och-Kan and 11th Lord's story feel thematically similar to other characters who tried to deny a part of themselves, but with the bad ending. Typically, when Hoyo explores this theme, the character eventually accepts those parts of themselves they tried to bury, but these two failed to accept and integrate those parts and met tragic ends as a result. I find it interesting that Shiakuatl kept repeating that one day Kukulkan would come to the same conclusion he had, and seemed perfectly willing to wait for that outcome. Also, it's interesting that he wanted to solve a problem using a method that could have dangerous repercussions that was opposed by his sibling. I don't have a strong point here, it's just an interesting similarity to point out. The Atlas of the New World is maybe not as bad an idea as turning everything into phlogiston goo. Ishkik and Abhub were also twins who disagreed with each other, and that story had a very tragic ending. I sure hope that's not meant to be some kind of foreshadowing for Aether and Lumine. These quests ended up being quite a bit about artificial intelligence, at a time when, in real life, something quite a bit less cool is being sold as artificial intelligence, and I need to yell about it for a minute. A lot of media I love features robots or sentient computers, but I cannot stress enough that fictional artificial intelligence should never be mistaken for what gets called artificial intelligence in the real world right now. Usually, fiction about robots or artificial intelligence are actually exploring themes about what it means to be human, and Genshin's approach doesn't seem to break any new ground there. Despite being a machine, Inefa is essentially a person capable of thinking and feeling, who develops connections to others and can learn what love is. In the fiction of the world, she is capable of developing a soul that makes her alive, as shown by awakening the Moonwheel. The chatbots and LLMs being called AI today are not conscious or self-aware, and they do not think. They put words together that are statistically most likely to result in a natural-sounding sentence, after being trained on massive amounts of, usually stolen data. But because of decades of fiction, humans and our pattern-seeking brains are eager to trick ourselves into thinking this AI is something it's not. I'm aware this is going to sound like an old lady yelling at cloud moment, but I'm sick of seeing and hearing about AI all the time. The thought of AI use actually being encouraged in schools fills me with equal parts rage and despair. I've heard it compared to weightlifting using a forklift, which feels like a perfect analogy. The point of lifting weights is not that the weights have moved, it's what happens in your body as a result of having lifted the weights. Similarly, the purpose of writing an essay for school is not to produce a finished essay, but to learn. Writing about something helps you process and sort out the information you took in. That's literally exactly why I made this video. And you know what sucks? When I look at my YouTube Studio dashboard now, there's an inspiration tab that uses AI to brainstorm ideas for my next video. This sucks, and I hate that I clicked on it. If this video has anything like a call to action, it's this. Don't let the existence of generative AI stop you from using your own hands, mind, and soul to create. No, ChatGPT is not a better writer, or artist, or coder than you. I can empathize with the feeling of frustration when you don't know what to say or how to do something, but you, a person, have more capacity to learn and grow than you might believe. Do not outsource your ability to think to a machine. Don't treat fancy autocomplete like an infallible guru on any topic, and never let a computer talk to your wife. Whew, okay, let me climb down from the soapbox so we can wrap things up. If Genshin was a movie or a TV series, its current approach to storytelling probably wouldn't work at all. And a fair argument could certainly be made that it doesn't always work super well as a video game. But I actually like that my understanding of Genshin's world and lore requires me to put some effort into it. Hopefully there will still be plenty of insight to be gained from poking around in every corner and close reading and rereading of the supplementary texts going into Nodcry. You could even say that piecing together Genshin lore like this is my hobby. Actually playing the game is only a small part of my enjoyment. Thinking about it is important too. I can't get the same enjoyment out of it if I don't even try to make these connections for myself, and just wait for other people to tell me what the answers are. Therefore, I am going to keep trying to read and understand the quests for myself as much as I can. What does that mean? I don't know, but there's a connection there. And someone smarter than me might make a YouTube video about it one day. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please consider giving a like and subscribing to the channel. Maybe you'd also like to watch one of my other videos. You can also catch me live on my Twitch channel most Thursdays and sometimes Mondays. As you may have guessed, I mostly stream Genshin, but sometimes I do art or crafting streams, or even play other games. Stop in sometime and say hi. That's all for now. Take care. See you next time.